Chronicles of the Grim Reaper, The Shadow Within, by Griz Calderon. Kathryn first saw him when she was 7. She stood barefoot in the hallway, too small to make sense of what had happened, but old enough to know it was serious. Her mother's body lay on the living room floor, pale and motionless, her breath shallow and fading. The ambulance lights flickered red against the wallpaper as the paramedics worked quickly. Her father's voice was tight with panic, while Kathryn and her sisters stood side by side, peering into the room, holding each other and crying. Kathryn didn't speak. She stood with them, but somehow apart, quietly watching as tears rolled down her cheeks. And then she saw him. Not the thing that would haunt her later. The Reaper. Tall. Still. Cloaked in black. He didn't move. Didn't speak. A curved blade arced behind him, not threatening, just present. His head tilted slightly, as if acknowledging her presence. And though he made no sound, Kathryn felt something unfamiliar settle over her. Stillness. A quietness that wrapped itself around her for just a moment, like the hush before a storm. It was as if he was watching her, and she was watching him. She didn't understand it then, but she would come to know it well. Because this wasn't the last time her mother would drift to the edge. Some days, she wouldn't get out of bed. Other times, she'd stare at nothing for hours, unreachable by words or touch. The house would grow quiet in a way that felt dangerous. And when things got too heavy, when the darkness closed in, the ambulance would come again. And every time it happened, he was there. Not to take her mother, but to bear witness. Kathryn and her sisters spent much of their childhood learning how to keep things steady. They learned to cook meals, clean, comfort each other, and step in when their mother couldn't. They learned to read moods the way other kids read storybooks. No one had to say it out loud. They understood. Together. Kathryn learned early how to be dependable, how to stay calm, how to make it easier for everyone else. It became her role, her rhythm, her identity. As she grew older, that rhythm followed her into adulthood. She carried the weight of other people's problems, friends, family, even strangers. If someone needed help, she gave it. If someone needed something done, she did it. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for much in return. She gave because she could. Because she knew how. Because it felt like the right thing to do. But over time, it wore on her. No one seemed to see how much she carried. No one seemed to see how deeply she gave. People came to her with open hands, but rarely with open hearts. They took what they needed, leaving her emptier each time. And Kathryn, in her quiet loyalty, let them. Somewhere along the way, she stopped noticing how much of herself she had poured out. She started waking with pain in her bones and tension in her chest. Her heart raced without reason. Her mind felt foggy, her body tired even after sleep. Doctors ran tests, blood work, imaging. They told her everything looked fine. But she wasn't fine. She didn't feel fine. On the contrary, she felt terrible, weak, drained, sick in a way no one could explain. Days, she just wanted to disappear. She kept searching for something, anything, that could explain why she felt like she was slowly fading. But there was no diagnosis, no clear reason for the heaviness that clung to her, the ache behind her ribs, the fatigue that made her feel like she was walking through molasses. And still, she didn't speak. Not about the dreams, not about the presence, because it was back. She hadn't seen it since she was a child, but now it lingered again, just behind her, in the corners of mirrors, in the cold spots of her home when she sat alone and cried without sound. A figure, a presence. Not the Reaper, something else. It said nothing, did nothing, but it watched. And when Kathryn's pain grew too sharp, it drew nearer. When her thoughts turned toward surrender, it pressed closer. It never spoke, but its meaning was clear. Let me take it. Let me make you forget. You don't have to feel this anymore. And she wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe there was something, anything, that could make the weight go away. She felt it wrap around her like a weighted blanket, offering silence, numbness, the promise of temporary peace. It told her she didn't have to fight anymore, that she could drift away from the ache if she just let go. A lie she wanted to believe. A lie that almost sounded like mercy. But deep down, she knew. Nothing it offered was real. It only delayed the pain, never healed it. But she had a job, a life, people who relied on her. She stayed quiet and tried to keep going, even as she slowly disappeared. The collapse came suddenly. She was in the kitchen. Morning light spilled through the window. Then, nothing. When she opened her eyes, she was in a hospital bed. And he was there, the Reaper, standing by the window, silent, still. His scythe rested beside him, the curved blade catching the faint light. And across the room, in the darkest corner, the other, the shadow. Not shapeless this time. Now it had a form, tall, lean, shifting like smoke in a windless room. Its face wasn't a face, just an impression, like a memory with sharp edges. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. Kathryn looked away. That night, the shadow stood closer than ever. Kathryn could feel it leaning over her, the weight of it pressing down on her chest like it was ready to absorb her whole. But something shifted. A memory surfaced, not of anyone else, of herself, as a child, standing in the hallway, watching. She had once promised she would never let anyone feel that kind of helplessness again. But somewhere along the way, she forgot that she mattered too. I can't do this anymore, she whispered into the dark. The presence stirred. I can't save everyone. The words felt like a betrayal, but they were the truth. She had tried everything, given everything, and it had broken her. Across the room, the Reaper tilted his head, not in judgment, in understanding. I won't lose myself again, Kathryn said quietly. And with that, the shadow began to unravel. It recoiled, not with anger, but with confusion. It had never needed to force its way in. It had been invited, fed by silence, by shame, by the belief that her pain wasn't worth speaking aloud. Now that it had been seen, really seen, it lost its grip. She realized then that the shadow had never carried her pain. It had only hidden it, masked it, numbed it just enough to make her think she could survive without facing it. But she didn't want numbness. She wanted freedom. The Reaper nodded once, and then they both were gone. Kathryn left the hospital the next day. She did not return to the life she had before. She set boundaries. She said no. She stopped apologizing for her exhaustion. She stopped trying to save people who didn't want to be saved. She stopped absorbing the chaos and started choosing peace. And slowly, she came back to herself. Years later, Kathryn stood barefoot on her porch. The sun warmed her face, and the quiet hum of life carried on behind her. Her hands no longer shook. Her breath no longer felt her, and she felt him. Across the yard, beneath the old oak tree, the reaper stood, still, cloaked, familiar. But there was no urgency in his presence, only peace. Kathryn smiled. She nodded once, and he nodded in return. Not goodbye, just acknowledgement. The shadow within her was gone, and the rest of her life was finally hers. The end.